Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.
After Mom and Dad took over the farm from my grandparents, one of the first things we did was plant a shelter belt on the west side of the farm. And when my brother and his wife built their new house in the city subdivision, they too put in a shelter belt. Come along with Prairie Yard and Garden as we find out where those trees and shrubs come from that wrap our homes and farms with protection and beauty. In history, we learned about Johnny Appleseed and Teddy Roosevelt, who traveled across many states planting apple trees and promoting conservation. Today, we are visiting with Blaine Mardian, manager of Big Sioux Nursery in Watertown, South Dakota. He also grows as many trees and shrubs as he can to promote conservation of our water, soil, and wildlife. Welcome, Blaine.
Thank you for coming.
Tell us about Big Sioux Nursery.
Big Sioux Nursery was established back in 1957 under the Soil Bank program back in then. Many nurseries throughout the United States were established at that time. We were primarily a conifer nursery at that time. Then in 1978 we got into the production of the trees and shrubs deciduous stock. We were a state agency until that time. In 1996 we formed a nonprofit corporation with the soil conservation districts in South Dakota, and we've been that way ever since. I have the conservation districts elect the 7-member board of directors, and I report to the 7-member board of directors for the nursery. Deciduous are any trees or shrubs that lose their leaves in the wintertime. Conifers, mostly a needle up in this area, are needle trees. They don't lose their needles, except the larch that we have in the background, and those are deciduous conifer. Now, not all conifers are evergreens, and not all evergreens are conifers. So, for the most part, your needle ones, those are conifers. The larch, even though it is deciduous, it does have needles. It drops its needles in the wintertime, so it is a deciduous conifer. And then the shrubs and trees, again, they drop their leaves for the most part up in our neck of the woods, drop their leaves in the wintertime.
How many species do you grow here at the nursery?
With the trees and shrubs, we also grow some native perennials, perennial forbs, and grasses. With all the species combined, we're probably well over 100 different species of trees and shrubs.
Who do you sell your plant materials to?
The annual production is about 1.5 million trees a year, and primarily the majority of that goes to the South Dakota Conservation Districts. We do sell material to North Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, Nebraska. We do sell to some state agencies like State Game Fish and Parks, once in a while some federal agencies, but primarily conservation districts. We can sell retail, but we're more or less a wholesale operation. We don't really want to compete with our customers, so if somebody wanted to come out and buy, we'd run it through a conservation district if possible that way.
How do you decide what to grow and how much to grow each year?
It's taking out a crystal ball and polishing it up. We look at past history and we see where the trends are going. For instance, green ash. We used to sell 250,000 green ash in a year. Right now, with the emerald ash borer, we're down to about 15,000. As we see trends happening, we follow those trends. If we see areas that I think the market should go this way, we'll try to enhance that, try to get people to go after those and market that way. But it's looking at past history, seeing where the trends are, seeing what the government programs like CRP are doing.
Can you explain what is meant by a shelter belt as compared to a living snow fence? Because I've heard that term too. And what the difference is between these?
A living snow fence is designed in such a way that you trap the snow before the area you want to protect. Let's say a highway. So what you need to do is you need to plant the shelter belt at least 150, 200 feet away from the protected area or that. So your windward side, you want a heavy shrub row so you get the wind as it comes in to start pushing up. And then as it goes over, you have the second row as a little higher elevation, so it keeps elevating it, and then the snow is going to be dropping at that point. And so every foot in height that you get, you protect 10 feet downwind. So by the time you have a dense belt that nothing's going to go through it, it's going to come up, over, drop its load, and then you're going to protect the highway, you're going to protect your house. Farmstead shelter belt around, usually they're designed to protect against the prevailing winds. And usually in our area it's the north and west. So the north and west side of a house or a farmstead, you're going to protect so that you cut down on the wind, reduces your heating costs and your cooling costs in the summertime. So it not only does it for the snow, but it also lessens the wind and takes care of the microclimate, creates a little microclimate in there where the house is. With a living belt, you want it blocking. Now when we get into a field windbreak, you might want to say, I don't want to block all the snow and dump it in one spot. I want to distribute the snow out of a long area. Say you start getting into western South Dakota and those places, you've got a long distance between obstructions. And so the wind can pick up, we call it a fetch distance. And so you get a long miles upon miles of that wind accumulating and building up, and it can really howl. By putting in a windbreak, a porous windbreak, you're going to want something a little more porous than this. And so that when the wind hits that belt, it's going to, instead of going 40 miles an hour, it's maybe 10, 15. If it's porous enough, what's going to happen is if you do get snow, it's going to distribute it throughout the belt and over the field. And so you're going to get snow cover over the top of the soil, and it's going to keep that snow there and protect it that way. So farmstead, living snow fence, kind of the same thing. A field windbreak, totally different. And then you can get into a wildlife windbreaks. There, we want to have the belt at least 7 to 10 rows wide, at least. It can be more. And part of the reason is that, okay, you want to protect an area. Again, you have that dense row of shrubs. It could be anything from lilac to cedar, whatever. And as the wind comes in, it's going to elevate it, it's going to dump down. Now, if you got a short 3-row windbreak for wildlife protection, what's going to happen is the snow is going to dump right into the belt, and it's going to destroy all the habitat for the critters to come in and get protected. So if you have a much wider belt, the first few rows are going to be loaded with snow. The next rows are going to be open, allowing the game to come in and be protected from the environment and that type of thing.
Oh, that's great information. I've always kind of wondered about that, and so that'll be really interesting to a lot of our viewers too. Where do you collect the seeds from to start all of, or I guess the next question I should ask is, do you start your plants from seed or from cuttings or both?
We start them from both. The vast majority of our stuff is started from seed. There's a few things like the cottonwood, willow, and we do grow honeysuckle, those are all raised from cuttings. And we'll take the cuttings on the nursery and process them and stick them in the fall. We do collect seed on the nursery and the surrounding areas. We have staff that does that. We also have collectors throughout the state. We have collectors in northeastern South Dakota. I've got collectors in the central part of the state that do collect seed and ship it to us.
Why do you do cuttings of those 3 species as compared to not doing seed on those?
Different trees are made up differently. Cottonwood is a separate male tree and a separate female tree. And that's what they've done with the hybrids that you see in the landscape industry, like Robusta poplar. And those are male trees, or they're sterile females. But for the most part, they're male trees. They're never going to produce cotton. But with a cutting, you get an exact duplicate of the parent. We have hybrid males that have a mixture of various selections of cottonwood, and then we have our natives. We've got some selections that we do from cuttings, but then we also collect cotton so that we get a wide variety of male and female in there. The reason we go with kind of a composite on the hybrids is that if a disease or insect goes and it hits one particular species, by having a mixture in there, you're not going to devastate the whole shelter belt.
You get a little bit more genetic diversity in there.
And that's the important part. We want genetic diversity. That's why we have 80 to 100 different species of trees here, is we want to diversify. You know, we just don't seem to learn our lesson. We started out American elm, you know, that was planted in every town. The Dutch elm disease comes in and wipes that out. So what do we go to? We go to green ash. So now we got the emerald ash borer coming in. So what do we do now? Well, let's go to a maple. And everybody's planting Freeman maple. Well, are we learning our lesson? No disease or anything's coming in on the maple. We need to have the lindens. We need to have the oaks. We need to have the hackberries, all the different variety of trees. We need to have that diversity.
You had mentioned that you have different people collecting seed, but it sounds like they collect more in this northern Great Plains region. Can you use seed from other areas?
Yeah, you can. If you look at the mix of species that we have, you got Nanking cherry, you got Harbin pear, you got Russian olive. What's in those names? Nanking is coming out of China, Harbin is out of China, Siberia for the elm. Our counterpart in the world, as far as longitude and latitude and distance, you can't get much further from the ocean than where we're at right now. Well, if you go on the other side of the world, that's in Mongolia. And so when they go and look for new species, they go to those areas that have the same climate that we do. And so that's why we got Nanking cherry. So in essence, since Nanking cherry came from China, you could grow it in Texas, as long as it was Nanking cherry. You can grow it in Texas, you can grow it in North Dakota, as long as the cultural methods have been the same and you're putting them into storage right, it probably doesn't matter too much where you get that type of thing. However, when you get into natives like plum, chokecherry, your cedars, your pine, anything that's native, we really say you don't want to move things more than 200 miles north or south. You can go a little bit further than that, but you start bringing chokecherry from Oklahoma or Missouri and bringing that up into South Dakota, North Dakota, or northern Minnesota, it doesn't have the same, it doesn't go to winter sleep the same time that our stuff does up here. And you can see when you start getting varieties that are further south, they don't shut down as early. Our native species, they know, hey, winter's coming, we know what's coming up, we better button it up. And so they start to go dormant earlier than those other ones. A prime example is like, say, green ash. It's opposite buds. If you see a green ash that comes up, forks, that branch forks, that branch forks, you know that every time that tip has died out, and so causing that side branching. So that tree was not hardy for the area. It's always tip dying. It may not kill it totally, but it's not real hardy. And the thing is, yeah, that plant might, that chokecherry, that cedar might live 10 years. But we get that 1 in 10 year storm. I've been here for 38 years. I've lived through, what is it? 3 1 in 500 year floods. You know, that's only supposed to happen 1 in 500 years. But, you know, you're going to get climatic conditions that come in and could wipe it out. So you've got 10 years, 15 years invested in your shelter belt or in your trees, and they die out. That's not what I want. So we go with seeds that's in the area, in the region, that's hardy. We know it's hardy for the area.
We were talking about collecting seed and everything. Would you be willing to show us some of the seeds that you have collected and maybe how you prepare them for planting?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we go over to the cleaning facility and I'll show you how we do process some of the seed to get them ready for planting.
Excellent.
Okay, follow me.
I have a question. The apples on my apple tree have orange and yellow spots on it that look like a target. Should I be concerned?
If you saw it this year in particular, that probably what you saw was what we call cedar apple rust. And it's been very common this year. It's a fungus that attacks the leaf early in the season. It's usually this orange circle with a gray or brown spot in the center. And it's caused by a fungus, as I said, that comes early in the season. It can be sprayed and prevented. Some of the all-purpose fruit sprays, if you apply them on time in the spring, will prevent this. But it's actually a disease that's shared with cedar trees. And so you have to have a cedar tree, although technically they're not cedar trees. The species that acts as the alternate host is actually the upright juniper tree. And it tends to be the wild ones that we see this more on. But if you have some upright junipers in the area and you're seeing this on the leaves of your tree, that's probably the problem. Occasionally it will get a little bit onto the fruit, but for the most part, 90+% of the problem will be on the leaves.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
Okay, you asked about seed. Every seed has a different process that goes through it to get it to the point where we want to plant it. You've seen these around at people's yards, honey locust. It's just kind of one man's trash is another one's treasure. This is our treasure. But we need to get the seeds out of here, okay? So what we do is we'll grind it up. We got a machine that chews it up and grinds it up, and it goes from this to a bunch of powdery, chewed up straw mash. You can kind of see the seeds in there. Mm-hmm. So then once we get it to this stage, then we'll run it through a fanning mill. Everybody's, you know, the old fanning mill with the screens and stuff, and it knocks the trash out, and we finally get to where we have clean seed. You see how nice and shiny that is. This is as hard as a rock. It's got a real hard seed coat. And so what we need to do is we need to break that seed coat down. And since we're dealing, a lot of times we've had Arbor Day projects where the school teachers give us a seed, so we send them some honey locust seed. The little kids will see how shiny that is. The kids will take out that seed and they'll take an emery board and they scratch the side of the emery board, and then they'll plant it and it'll come up in 10 days, okay? Well, when you're dealing with, you know, 20, 30, 50 pounds of seed, we're not going to take an emery board after it. So what we do is we put it in concentrated pure sulfuric acid, and we'll leave it in that acid for about a half hour, and you can see how that's changed in color.
Yeah.
And that's enough etching on the seed coat to cause it to germinate. The seed coats become pervious, so it allows moisture to get in. With a seed coat like that, moisture cannot get into the seed. And so by putting acid into it, it etches it, makes it break down much quicker. Mother Nature would let it go over many, many years. That way it diversifies and says, I'm going to have offspring over many years' time. So this way we speed up the operation, take care of Mother Nature and do that. So that's one thing for honey locust.
I bet that's a way to protect the species too, because if some seeds germinate and it's not ideal conditions, then they wait until something else comes up and see if it's better growing conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a lot of our fruit species, you know, your choke cherries, your plum, Nanking cherry, this is what we have here, is Nanking cherry. You can see it's real moist and juicy in that. So we use a different machine for that. This is a Dibvig cleaner, and what it does is inside you can see there's a bowl, a beveled bowl that is down inside, and this is a plate. You can see the bevel on that. So the bowl sits here and this sits down on top of it. So then what we do is we gap it just enough to keep the seed up on top, but lets the juice and pulp out the bottom. So what happens is we'll put a door on this, close that up, spin it around, add water to it, the juice and pulp flows out of here, and then once it's all clean, we pop it open and the seed comes out here, and then we'll funnel it off. So your fruit species done in a machine like this, the honey locust, run it through a grinder and run through the fanning mill.
Then, do you start the seeds in a greenhouse or do you plant them out into the beds right away?
We do seed it into the field. We do not have a greenhouse, so we seed it into the field. We sow it into we have 3 seasons. We have stuff that does not require a treatment for the seed, like the pines and spruce. They'll be planted immediately in the spring, and they germinate within 10 days. We've got some species like eastern red cedar, Rocky Mountain juniper that require a warm treatment followed by a cold treatment. Mother Nature says, I want you to be warm so long and you need to be cold so long before you germinate. So we'll plant those in the middle of the summer. And then we have the species like choke cherry and plum and those things that we'll plant in the fall. We'll let Mother Nature take care of them and break the dormancy on them, and then they'll germinate in the springtime.
How do you plant the seeds? Because when you do so many like that, do you have a machine that plants them?
We have a drill, and normally that drill sows 6 rows on a 4-foot wide bed. Our pathways are 6 foot center to center that the tractor drives down, and it pulls a drill, and it basically makes a furrow, and the seeds are free dropped into that furrow and covered up. And so there's different gradients that we put on the machine that, okay, we want so many seeds per foot, that type of thing, depending on the germination that's gone on it.
And then how long are they out in those seed beds before you dig them to sell to your soil conservation districts?
Okay, it depends on the species. Some species like plum, we'll plant them in the fall. It'll germinate in the spring, and by that fall we can harvest them, so they can be harvested in 1 year. You get things like the honey locust. We'll plant them, we'll acid treat it, we'll plant it in the spring, it'll germinate, it'll grow that first year, and then we'll allow it to grow a second year. So that will be sold as a 2-year-old. So we'll have classifications as a 1-0 or a 2-0, meaning 1-year-old, 2-year-old. And spruce, for instance, we'll take spruce seed, it's very, very tiny, and so we'll broadcast that over the bed, scratch it in, and then those are allowed to germinate in the spring, grows that first year, grows the second year. The fall of the second year, we'll lift them out of the ground and we'll put them in a transplanter that will space them out every 2 to 3 inches apart, and they were allowed to grow in that transplant bed for 1-2 years. So they'll be classified as a 2-2, 2 years in a seed bed, 2 years in a transplant bed. So by the time they're sold, it's 4 years old. So right now, the spruce that we planted this spring grows 2016, 2017, transplanted in 2017, grows 2018, grows all of 2019, and will not be sold till 2020.
Wow. So you have a machine that actually can dig up those little seedlings to get
Right.
ready to sell them too.
And we normally don't lift at this time of the year, but it'll give you the principles and the idea of that.
How do you store the plants before they're ready to sell? Do you have a cooler that you put them into?
After we lift them, we put them in 4x4 boxes. They'll be brought in, put into our cooler, and then they'll be brought into the grading shed where the people sort them to the different sizes that we need, and then they'll be stored in cardboard boxes inside our cooler. We have 4 coolers that are each 30 by 50 feet by 14 feet high. So we have 4 coolers, and we can store probably close to 4 million trees in there.
4 million
we
trees.
needed to.
Wow. If you had to pick 3 plants that you would recommend for good wildlife plantings, which ones would you recommend?
Depending on what type of wildlife, if we were looking at turkeys or squirrels or something like that, the American hazelnut works real well. You know, the birds are going to pick any kind of fruit that you want, and most fruits available, but one of the fruits that aronia or black chokeberry, we'll call it aronia, it does go by black chokeberry, but aronia is a much nicer name. The fruit persists on the tree throughout the winter, and so it becomes food fare for the wildlife during the winter months. Another one is Midwest crabapple. Unlike other crab apples that sit on the tree and rot and ferment, that Midwest crabapple dries up like a raisin, and it persists on the tree throughout the winter, fall and winter, and becomes wildlife food for the birds coming back on migration or whatever. So those are some species for taking care of that way. Most wildlife species, trees, shrubs are not their primary, food is not their primary source, but more or less for nesting habitat or escape cover, that type of thing for the pheasants and that.
So if people are interested in finding out about this, they can go visit their Soil and Water Conservation District personnel to find out and maybe even see if they can get some of these things.
Correct, yes.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us all about this. This has been just so interesting and a great education.
Well, I'm so happy you guys could come and visit and talk about this, so thank you.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yackel Jolene, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHill.org.